In this episode, we're going to talk about what goes into making one of my heritage one-of-a-kind pieces of jewelry. I'm going to let you on the inside of one of my favorite design inspirations. You'll never guess what it is. We're going to take a trip down memory lane, and I'm going to share a few notable people that I've made jewelry for in the past and some stories behind that. We're going to explore what is going on with the Instagram algorithm and figure out if we could stay ahead of it, if we should try. And then finally, should we self-censor? Should this podcast be self-censored? Should we censor what we're going to say on it for business purposes or other purposes? Should be interesting. I think we have a good show. So with that, how are you doing?
I'm doing just fine, Chad.
There he is. A second ago, before we started filming, there was a car. We say it every episode, and it's almost becoming really annoying, but this one was notable. That was the loudest car I've ever heard.
It was so loud I couldn't form thoughts while it was happening. I just paused and kind of stuttered.
And you related it to torture.
It felt like I could imagine if I had to listen to that for more than a minute straight, my psyche would start to wither.
Yeah.
It was so loud.
Yeah, it was very, very loud. I can barely hear.
And I'm generally a fan of loud car exhaust, but that was like Guantanamo Bay levels of exhaust.
Exactly. A grenade going off in your ear type of thing. Okay. Show and tell. So, we have a fun little camera here if you're watching. This is a piece of my heritage one-of-a-kind. This came out in the last collection. And I kind of just wanted to share. This is made by Tufa casting. Tufa, if you're unfamiliar, is called, it is petrified ash. So it's actually just found on the side of the road. I think I mentioned that in a previous episode. But you carve, I should have brought a piece of Tufa. What am I thinking? You carve a piece of this petrified ash and into the shape you want. You can even carve designs into it. And then you melt down metal, and then you pour it into the mold. And the reason why a lot of people like this method is because it's fully custom from start to finish, which I want to show you the texture. You can kind of see the texture. You can definitely see it on the inside here. It's got my signature stamp on the inside. And this is made using recycled silver, but it's coin grade, 0.900. And that's one of the, I don't know, there's very few people that make jewelry in a Tufa cast form, just because it's so primitive and it's not so super available. It's kind of hard to get some Tufa. But people will go to Arizona. Yeah, I'm here. I'm showing the thing. It's not, I want to show you this ring. And this is Kingman turquoise. Kingman in Arizona, of course. But it's water web turquoise. It's a little bit rarer. High grade. Some of the nicest stuff you can find. But yeah, you carve this piece, and there's a video actually, if you have it pulled up. So this is the process of making it. This is Tufa rock, Tufa stone.
It looks almost prehistoric, even just the act of creating it,
Sure.
Your mold.
A little ASMR. For those just listening, I'm carving a piece of this petrified ash. And then you ventilate it. That's what those lines are, so that the air can escape as you're pouring in the silver. Otherwise, the silver won't go to the bottom. And then you do what's called carburizing, and that's where it turns it black, prevents it from sticking to the tufa. And of course, you melt down your silver. You can use coins, old silver coins, old scrap, and then you pour it in. And then so essentially you pour bars. What I do with these cuffs specifically is that video shows, and I'm actually working on one for a brand called, well, I won't say that right now, but but yeah, I'm working on a piece right now, and I just pour the bar, and then you clean up the bar after. It's just the piece of silver, and it looks like a piece of junk, and then you have to soak it in like vinegar water, and then it cleans it all up. Some people don't like the texture that it leaves, but I think it adds to the character and the uniqueness. It's kind of like a fingerprint in my perspective. And then you add your stamps. On this one, I have you want to show it? I have a little like curved arrow stamp. And so I made that stamp from scratch. And then all of the other stamps, of course, as well. But
how do you make the actual stamp? Do you carve it out of a material, or do you have to is that like an impression, or can you describe that process a little bit?
I should have brought some stamps too. I'm terrible at this. Yeah, it's just a piece of steel. So you could use like old rebar. You could use old nails. I've got a few stamps that I use a lot that are nails. And yeah, so you heat it up. It kind of works opposite to silver, actually. Silver, once you heat it up until it's like red, and then you quench it, it actually preserves the softness of the metal. I think they call it dead soft at that point. And with steel, it actually works the opposite. You heat it, but you cannot quench it. If you quench it in water or oil, it hardens it. And so if you're going to modify a steel stamp, you got to heat it up, then you got to let it cool naturally on its own. And then you can modify it. You can put it in a vise, you can carve it, stamp it, file it. And so yeah, you make your own steel stamps. A lot of silversmiths, you got to make your own steel stamps. There's not really a good maker. You can buy real generic ones, but they're real noticeable. And so any real artist or any real silversmith tends to make their own stamps. But even that's like an art in and of itself. So it's kind of crazy. There's an artist I like a lot. It goes by the name Buffalo. And I believe he lives in Santa Fe. He works out of Santa Fe. But he's one of the best stamp makers. And you can kind of tell each artist's piece based off of the stamps they use, because they're unique. Each stamp is one of a kind. And a lot, like I said, a lot of the times they're made by the individual artists. But yeah, there's one other aspect, if you'll do another little close-up, is it's called like repose. It actually comes from Spain, the idea of chasing and repose. It's a silver or metalworking thing, but you see these little bump outs on the inside. They serve to kind of give you dimension on the outside. So you push out, you bump out from the inside to the outside. And a lot of this technique's not necessarily like super well known, but when you see it in a piece, you're like, oh yeah, that silversmith has a little bit of experience. It's kind of just like an added layer of value to the piece. Chasing and repose. There's a lot of little techniques that go into it, but to the real hunters, the people that really like pieces, the art of it, when they see like a bump out or they see certain techniques, they're like, oh, this guy's been doing it for a while. And it really adds to the value of your work. But yeah, these are a part of my heritage collection. When you see the intro to the show, you see heritage, you see the Common Trading Post, and then you see St. Poncho. Those are all kind of like the separate independent brands, but all under the moniker of this business, whatever this is. And then lastly, I have this week's release, which is the triangle stacking cuffs. I've done these a lot in the past, and this week, this is one of them here. They have little conchos on the terminals, and there's 3 different patterns that are going to be available by the time this episode goes up. And so you can go to chadbarela.com and you can find those pieces available. That's this week's release. Lastly, cool announcement. I'm real excited about this. I have a buddy, Gage Spees. He just got married. Congratulations. But he's actually from here. I knew him from here in the music scene. He used to play in a band with Chorus's cousin, Chris. And then that was the band that I eventually became a part of. Me and Gage have very similar stories, actually. because then he moved to Nashville. Then I moved to Nashville. He actually got me my job over at Table 3, which was the first job I had in Nashville. Anyway, so he's a hat maker. He makes hats. You guys probably, some of you have heard of his brand. It's called Daisy May. Well, he's opening up a little store in downtown Nashville, and we're going to be a part of it. So I will be sending off some pieces to display. So if you're in Nashville, go see them. They'll be there early June, so in a couple weeks. So you'll be able to see a few of my pieces. I'm hoping to get a couple squash blossoms done by the time I send them out, but not making any promises. And then hopefully toward the end of the year, we're going to make a trip out there. Hopefully do a couple podcasts, interviews with some of our old friends. Maybe Chorus can come with us.
If I go, I'm getting some hot chicken, man.
Come on, man.
Yeah, do a show.
Hattie B's. And then lastly, so we're very, very close to getting in our new studio spot where we don't have to set up every single week, and it's going to be so awesome. They just put up the walls. Hopefully in the next couple weeks, we can start kind of moving in and brainstorming and what we're going to make the place look like. But that's going to be exciting. So with that, let's start the show. Come on. Okay. Doing our tradition here with the Palo Santo. We're going to go down a memory lane together. I, for whatever reason, was going down the old Instagram photos, and I came across a bunch of people that I made jewelry for in the past. I'm thinking about kind of collaborations, who I want to do some collaborations with. And I brought up people who I've done collaborations with in the past. And one of these people, so I grew up in the music world, I mentioned that, and I was a big, big fan of this guy, Dallas Green. He used to go by the name Dallas Green, and then he changed his name to City and Color. And that kind of goes into this whole thing, but he had a producer and guitar player at a period of time. His name was Daniel Romano. These guys are both Canadian. There's a lot of good art that comes out of Canada. I don't know if you've noticed that. But
it's probably all the syrup.
Yeah, it's the maple. Daniel Romano was one of my favorite artists coming up. And when I was in Nashville, he was doing a show out there, and he had Dallas Green out. So I saw City and Color. Right, so he was just kind of there, and I was like, to me, like at the time, I was like, dude, this guy's like a big inspiration to me. And it's funny how those people change throughout different moments of your life. Like now, it wouldn't be a big deal, but at the time, I was just like, oh my gosh, this guy represents so much of my upbringing and inspiration and whatever. Have you ever met one of your icons or like somebody who's been that to you in your life?
Yeah, I feel like I have. I don't know if anything comes to mind right away, but I've met a number of musicians and that sort of thing. One of my favorite bands, Foals, I ran into eating sushi before a show. Huh. And what's funny is I talked to my friends into holding my place in line because I was starving. And then I came back with all these selfies with the band, and they were pissed.
Like, are you kidding me? You got the best of both?
Yeah, they were in the middle of dinner, so I didn't get to go super deep. But yeah, there's a couple moments where it's like, that was big at the time. I don't know if it would be as big now.
Yeah. So I see Dallas Green standing there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta say something. When are you going to get another opportunity? And it's at a bar, or it's at like a bar venue in Nashville. I believe it was called not Mercury Lounge. That's a meme. I forget what the venue was called. I'm pretty sure it closed down actually, but it was in Nashville. And so I go up to him and I'm like, what do I say? And I was, oh my gosh, oh, such an idiot. Cringe alert 98. But yeah, I introduced myself to him, and he was he wasn't very nice. I don't want to disparage him, but he wasn't very nice, and it kind of killed the vibe. It killed the thing. He was totally normal. Like, I don't blame him. but it's like you're in the, I don't know. It was a big bummer. And so it kind of really turned me off to the whole situation. But anyways, what was cool about it is that Daniel Romano, who, is a good artist in his own right as well. Very good, actually. I was in contact with them and his band and actually made him a ring. And so when he came through on that, I believe it was on that trip, I met him over at his hotel and I got to deliver a ring to him. There's a picture of him on the Instagram there. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. That was pretty cool. Not that he's a good buddy or anything. Mr. Romano, he's a style icon, honestly. He's had so many different phases of his style, from like a real like country. Like he went super country. Like George Jones, like really like bedazzled jackets, the whole 9 yards. Very much so appropriated country music in the best way, not in a bad way. But yeah, I made a piece for him. Another person I made some pieces for was Joe Greer. Now he's a really, really good photographer, right down my lane of preference, style, I guess. He shoots on a Leica, which is out of my price range as far as a camera goes. But we did a collaboration, what was it, like how long ago was that?
This was 2017.
6 years ago. Wow. You know what's crazy about Nashville is that there are so many people that are in the similar sphere as you. This is his feed right here, and we're showing his feed. He's got a very, very good eye for photo. The go to that one with the camera and the coffee. There's something about this reel that's just so good, right? You got the texture of the jacket, the color tones, the snow coming in, a little bit of talking in the background. It's just like the capturing of a serious moment. I nearly cried. Go back. There's one that he did in India. Maybe it's at the top of his feed. Maybe not. Go down. Go to the one with the birds. No. Go down. That one on the right, the yellow. Up one more up. This one. Can you zoom out a little bit? So you get the texture. I don't know if he's like on a bus or what, but the color of this guy's like wrap on his head, and he's just looking right into the camera. I can't imagine that this was posed intentionally. This was just a moment that he saw a guy. If you've ever watched Joe's, he's actually got a good YouTube channel. You should check it out, of like live street photography. And he just captures moments live when they're happening. He's got a whole course on it. This isn't an ad for him, but he's just a genuinely good eye. He has a great, great eye, capturing moments. But yeah, I was super honored to do a little collaborative situation with him. He wore my White Buffalo Temple ring. Sold more rings, more of those than any other ring. Got to bring him back. Message me if you want one. I'll make one for you. I don't know if I'll bring him back, but, and then the Chief ring. He had one of each of those. Cool guy. Who else? Oh, Nikki Lane. That was a cool one. That was like one of my first collaborations, actually. And it was before she was kind of like bigger. You ever listen to Nikki Lane?
I don't think I'm familiar.
Find like a live video of hers. Like a live performance. Nikki Lane live. She's cool. She was like a big like Nashville local. She's actually got a vintage shop in East Nashville. I think it's still there. But I found her, or I got acquainted to her through my first shop that I was selling to. She's cool. She dated this dude, Chase, from LA who has like I think it's Highway LA. It's like a motorcycle brand. But yeah, she was a Nashville local. She was like an East Nashville local. She, super integrated to the East Nashville scene. And then, I got acquainted to her through this guy, Jimmy, who owned Moto Moda, which was the first store I was selling jewelry to in Nashville. That was a great relationship to make. At the time, I had these bangs, dude. Just like the Beatles bangs, you know, when they first came out. And I had short hair. pretty fun look. But I was walking across the place and that guy Jimmy who owned the shop, he's like, "Hey, you look like you're like Britpop kind of guy." I was like, "Hey, what's going on, man?" Really cool guy. He was like, he ran in like the motorcycle world. He had a physical retail spot. It was a really, really sweet spot. But yeah, anyway, jewelry making, man. I miss collaborating with some people. If you've got any ideas of who should collaborate with or reach out to, let me know. I'm thinking of a few people right now, reaching out. I've got a few in the works actually. Some you probably know. We'll see if they can happen. All right, I want to switch gears. Let's go to my design secrets. No, this is kind of a joke, but I used to go to sleep watching this guy. He's an interesting person. His name's Steve, and his YouTube's name is Steve1989. But what he does is he eats and reviews MREs, like field rations, military rations. And but some of them are like from World War II or like World War I. So some of them are like literally 100 years old. This is a breakfast ration from World War II, I believe.
Now, out of my own personal collection, we're going to be checking out this World War II U.S. Army issued breakfast K ration.
But when I came across this guy's channel, I had to subscribe because
World War II ration.
Not so much because of him, though his videos are pretty fascinating. I can sit there and watch them for hours.
Like, looks like something tore it right
But because of the military design,
that little bit right there.
the texture on that's dipped in wax. It's a breakfast ration. It's like cardboard dipped in wax so that it's waterproof.
Dipped in wax to waterproof them. And this one here, you can see that wax has, over the years,
it's really preserved it.
There's been some warping potentially, or that's always been that way after it was dipped on that.
But primarily is like the colors, the text,
excavate
the simplicity of the designs.
I'm going to reseal the box.
This is a great source of inspiration for even typography. Like if it looks good now, I want my designs to hold through time that way, you know.
There's something that I picked up along somewhere that was like the most sophisticated design is the simplest. Something like that. Most timeless design, something along those lines. But that's what I like about these is that they're timeless designs. It's nothing crazy. You know, it's utilitarian. It says a breakfast ration is B for breakfast on the sides. But the typeface, awesome. Really good. Color contrast. And then obviously the texture through the dipped wax was super, super good. But I remember this one being like one of my screenshots early on, like, I need to make something along these lines.
This layer. Just trying not to completely mangle this thing when I open it. I want to try and reseal it.
But this guy eats these. Does it say in the description how old this is? Yeah, I know for sure he ate like
1945, 70 years old.
So that's World War II breakfast field ration.
Got some gluing to do with the flap. But
fast forward to like him eating.
Not bad. By this point, it's rusted egg yolks.
Oh, gross.
He's plating it on a tray. That's so cool.
He puts everything on a tray. Same tray too.
Have you ever been to the Smithsonian in D.C.?
No.
They have George Washington's like dining set. His silverware, his salt, pepper, his everything. And it looks, I mean, obviously it doesn't look this refined, but it's crazy that they have it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
In a glass case, you can see it all.
For you to breathe in dust. Hey, you know when all
Anyways.
going to open
Awesome. And even the cigarettes, right? Like all of these, there's like so many things within this. And then the tins with the key. Like there's so much
check out that little
I don't know, history and fun and tradition that it would get me like so stoked, just inspired.
That font is Futura, I think.
Something like it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it turns 100. I have it in my calendar to throw a birthday
Really?
party for the font Futura because it's just...
That's a mid-century font.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Helvetica,
actually, it's actually,
Futura.
like, was created in the 20s and was used really popular in like the 50s and 60s.
Oh, I didn't know that. I know it's a 50s type of font, but I didn't realize it was created in the 20s. You know what's interesting about typography and typefaces is that typefaces are normally always created for the medium that they're going to be used on. And it used to be, like, typewriters used to have, they have a specific font for the typewriter, or even like digital. There's a whole history of typography that there was a documentary or something I watched, and it was talking about how certain internet typefaces were developed specifically because they had limited pixels to operate within. So certain fonts kind of just created themselves because of the pixels that were available to them. And I don't know that that was the case for, say, like the typewriter font, but because there's technology kind of made itself available, I think that's kind of how Futura kind of came to be, or Helvetica, as the mediums became more relevant and people started to use them more commonly.
There's this font that's really popular that's known for its legibility called Gotham.
Mm-hmm.
And I used it for a long time just because it looks so good. But I was watching a documentary, and the typeface designer was actually featured who designed it. Come to find out, he designed this font to be super legible because it was going to be in honor of the victims of 9/11. And so he knew that there was going to be thousands of names written in this typeface right next to each other, and he wanted to maximize legibility for the project.
Form follows function.
Yeah, it
It's
totally speaks to what you're saying.
Most typefaces are created specifically for the function that they will be used for, and what distance they're going to be seen at, what medium they're going to be used on, what paper, that type of thing, and what's going to be printing on the paper. And so it's just interesting how design has a utilitarian function, obviously, as well as an aesthetic function. All right. What's next? Oh, okay. So 1924 US posted a thing on Instagram a few days ago where he was exploring the idea that I think some of us all think about, especially content creators, the algorithm. Many of you guys remember early on, it used to be like 1-to-1, right? You follow somebody, you see their content. It was on a timeline. We call it the timeline for a reason. It's 1-to-1, so if somebody posts a photo, it gets posted in everybody's timeline that follows that person. That's how it used to be. It's crazy we have to explain that because some younger people don't even understand that. That's what's wild, is that was only, 10 years old, if that. And so you'd have, instant access to all the people that followed you. But then somewhere along the lines, I remember this actually, the first time I got introduced to this idea, and it was Facebook. Because we went from, in my era, we went from MySpace, where it was awesome. You had 1-to-1, you had real direct connection with your audience. There was no algorithmic medium interfacing between you and the audience member. No intermediary. And so it was just 1-to-1. It was awesome. Complete artist control. And then you got Facebook pages. MySpace phased out. Then it went to Facebook. You made a page. And then you'd acquire likes to your page. And then you'd have access to the people that liked your page. Well, eventually, Facebook got smart. And they started charging you to reach all of your audience. All of the people that liked your page. And I remember this because I was playing a show with Poema in somewhere. I don't remember where we were. And they wanted to advertise the show, but they had to pay for, to reach their own likers. And I was like, that's not right. You guys worked for that, under the expectation that you'd have access to them. You invested into this platform for that expectation. And then they throttled you. That seems immoral. That seems unethical. That seems wrong. And so, soon after that, Instagram gets bought up by Facebook. And then you have the same type of thing happening where your audience or the people that have followed your brand or your company or your page, your art, whatever it is, to see your stuff, no longer see it because the algorithm is programmed because they think they know what you want to look at. Even though you chose to follow that person, they've circumvented that and they've created an algorithm that says, no, you want to see this stuff. And then they've, and so it seems like it's being abused. And so obviously Christian Watson's frustrated. He's experiencing this 1924 US guy. And he's seeing a throttling of his content. He used to get tons and tons of reach. He's got 175,000 followers. It's, he's worked really hard to acquire the amount of following he has. And so he posts this post and kind of makes the case. Is this thing on? Instagram has rapidly decreased engagement over the years for all of us. Photographs, normally, which do excellent, have now had their positions fully relegated to video. Photographs are dead on this platform, despite the more popular style of photographs posted. But lately, it's been at breakneck speed. So those of you guys who first got on Instagram, of course, it was a photography platform. But obviously, they've gone more towards TikTok, Reels, because they want to compete with TikTok, of course. And so they're creating more incentives in the algorithm to push people more towards creating Reels so that they can compete with TikTok's imposing of their market share. And so they're manipulating its user base. And it's not genuinely organic and authentic. Okay, keep going. If you're up for a fun little adventure, a year ago, our average likes per photo were about 6,000. In the last 5 days, the average is less than 500, despite posting at peak times, popularized content, or engaging commentary. The culprit? It's not video. What's next? Scrolling my feed, I see a normal photo from a friend, followed by an advertisement, 2 suggested reels, and repeat. Quote, Christian, maybe you're just washed up. Maybe nobody cares about your content. And he says, no, I know I am. LOL, but I still have more to offer. And the fact that none of us even have true reach to our organic following, I feel further discourages any use or time spent on the app. Adapt or die. I love this saying, and I understand its application here on social media. But typically, adapt means to learn an entirely new medium that takes a considerable amount more time in order to preserve and honor the artistry in what's already built. The lack of consistency, even when posting reels content, feels equally discouraging to me, not because I live off of likes, or because the more interaction on posts translates to sales, which it does, but because the community aspect of Instagram feels sparse and scattered. Well, I guess I'll just bite my tongue and take the plunge into the wild world of Reels. Photography is dead on this app. Not just with me and our 175,000 followers, but with those beyond my talent who have millions. Our work, which helped to build the popularity of this platform via photographs, has lost out to the attention-grabbing and time-consuming art of the reel. Now, pause real quick. So that's what's frustrating, is the guys like him, early adopters to Instagram, which made Instagram a desirable app to flock to, the ones that created the content, that created the stuff. Now, of course, they don't own the app. So sure, I get it. It's a free market. They're an independent company. They can do what they want. That's true. However, it just seems unethical. It seems like a bait and switch, and that's exactly what it is. So you got guys like Christian Watson. You got guys like a ton of the early creators who literally set the culture of what kind of content Instagram became known for. And then they said, thank you. Thank you for bringing the audience. Now we're going to pivot. And it's hard because on one hand, it's like, I don't blame them. Because if they're going to compete, they've got to compete with the other platforms, which are TikTok. And so it just puts everybody in a difficult position. But it just seems like what he's saying is right, though. I mean, you got to adapt, right? You got to adapt, but it's frustrating because it's like, when do I not have to? When can I just expect what you guys have set out there as the expectation? It's like the business just keeps changing. The floor keeps changing. We got to keep moving, and so nothing is stable. And that's not. It doesn't seem fair. Okay, keep crying about it, right? Oh well, I guess that's just a part of business. You got to everything keeps changing. Honestly,
Are you familiar with the term doom scrolling?
no.
So that's a term that people use, that they get sucked into the like black hole of social media and they come out an hour and a half later. Time has passed, and I think that I don't know who said it first, but there's this idea that if a product is free, it means that you're probably the product.
Mm-hmm.
And since like the beginning of Instagram, it's obvious that it's pivoted to where the product is now the strategic, like manipulative game of getting us to look at ads and promoted content all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to know, like, how do you win at that platform as a content creator when the goal is not to promote you? The goal is not to have organic reach. The goal for Instagram is to promote their advertisers, And that leaves content creators in a weird place.
And it's presumptuous for us to think that the platform is ours or made for us. And it's not. The idea and the intention of the creator of these apps was to build an app that's successful, that has traction, that has value, so that they could sell it for $1 billion. That's what they did. That's what Instagram did. That's what I don't think Snapchat did, actually. I think Snapchat really has been in there and it's like, no, we're going to keep being us. They've actually been one of the few platforms that have kind of stuck to their founding identity and principles. But of course, Vine, I think, got bought by Twitter, right? And kind of just thrown away. Periscope, same idea. There's no more Periscope.
Did you see Elon did a Periscope randomly the other day?
I did see that. Is he going to revive it?
I don't know, but the developers were testing something. He went live on the only Periscope to exist right now.
Wow. Yeah, I think I do remember that. Periscope is scary. Live streaming is scary. There's like a psychological thing. I didn't even realize that I was getting into that. But I remember I went to the grocery store when I was still living in Nashville. I was like, I'm going to Periscope this. And I went live. And for whatever reason, I just got flooded in my mind of my anxiety. It's like anybody could pop in. And I just got so flush. And I was like, my hands started shaking. I don't know what it was. But the thrill of endless possibility of whoever could tune in, say whatever. It just felt weird. I felt naked in public. It was really weird. But there was a strange power to that. Another Periscope story. I got invited as an Instagram influencer to do content creation over at the Opry, the Grand Ole Opry. They were doing a promo thing where they were inviting a bunch of Nashville local people to do a Insta-meet type thing. And so we got kind of special access to the green rooms to go do these different things. And me and my wife, Bree, got to do this. And I did a Periscope of my experience at the Opry, the historic Opryland, the Grand Ole Opry, sorry. Because the Opryland is the hotel. That was pretty cool. I wish I still had that Periscope. I don't think I can. Is it still an app that you can?
I don't think so. I think it's been taken down.
Bummer. Yeah, the idea of this algorithm thing, right? So I heard this idea to get a little deeper. Now, whether or not there's an agenda, I heard somebody say that what's happening is that, what do they call it? It's not CGI. There's a 3-letter acronym that stands for the new agenda. That if you're compliant, then you're going to be elevated. And if you're not compliant, then you're going to be punished. I experienced this in 2020 when I kind of spoke out against...
Is that the ESG?
ESG, that's right. Environmental, social
governance.
Governance, yeah. So I heard this idea, and I imagine it's probably true, that if you are obedient to the ESG situation, which is you're perpetuating the official narrative, all these different things. then you're going to be preferred content on the internet at large. YouTubes, the Instagrams, the Twitters, maybe not the Twitters as much because Elon's kind of an opponent of this stuff. Seemingly.
I think he just said, there's a quote from like yesterday that says ESG is like the devil incarnate.
God bless him. And so I experienced, on Instagram, it used to be a policy. I don't know if they changed the policy or if it's just something they punished me. But if you get 10,000 followers, you have certain privileges. And one of those privileges was the swipe up to a website feature. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you know, audience. But I did notice that other people still had access to this feature, other businesses. And in 2020, I got in trouble for speaking out on a few of these issues specifically, and I'll be vague for the sake of YouTube. Masks and certain therapies, forced therapies, and in our businesses being required to enforce these types of things. And so I came out against that. And I believe that I got, just simply from mentioning the words, I got punished. I could no longer do the swipe up features. I was getting, as Christian Watson seemed to refer to, because he's an activist as well. He's an activist he's a Christian, and he's anti-corn. He's anti-objectifying of women, that type of thing. And he's a pro-Christian. He shares his testimony. He's a really awesome dude. But I imagine in his imagination, he's seeing that he's getting punished for his public views. And so there's this idea that if you're not obedient to the ESG, the official narrative, then you're going to be relegated to the digital ghetto. I heard somebody coin that term, and I thought, wow, that's pretty powerful. That's pretty interesting and kind of alarming. Is on certain of these platforms, the main ones, of course. There's other ones like Gab. Rumble's an interesting one, of course. That if you challenge power, you're going to get punished and throttled. Shadow banned. We've all probably heard that term. And that's not good because it's pretty authoritarian control through third-party means. And we've seen, actually, funny enough, that a lot of these platforms are integrated into the three-letter agencies in government. And so all that to say, that's actually a perfect transition. You got that Elon clip? It brings me into this next topic of how it's just, I struggle because I'm a business owner. My livelihood is on the line. Things I say here have a real life consequence, both in my audience and them, rejecting me or my product, but also in my reach potentially. And I think that I relatively fear being relegated to the digital ghetto, which could very well happen. But Elon kind of gets questioned on this idea because he's kind of quizzed. He's been going off, as many of you guys know, he bought Twitter a year ago or so for $45 billion, something crazy. And now it's worth like half that or something. Excuse me. But he gets asked about should he continue to speak freely on his own platform about speech, which is in his mind the public square. Should he continue to speak freely even though advertisers don't like it, even though they're controversial points, even though they may be true? And this is how he responds.
You don't see, in terms of when you're going to engage. For example, even today, Elon, you tweeted this thing about George Soros. Well, I'm looking for it because I want to make sure I quote it properly. But, you know what you wrote. But you basically...
It reminds me of Magneto. It's like, calm down, people. This is not like made a federal case out of it.
You also... you
He's got a great
wrote
laugh.
The very fabric of civilization, and Soros hates humanity. Like, when you do something like that, do you
I think that's true. That's my opinion.
Okay, but why share it? Why share it? Especially...
Share it?
Why share it when people who buy Teslas may not agree with you, advertisers on Twitter may not agree with you? Why not just say, hey, I think this. You can tell me. We can talk about it over there. You can tell your friends. But why share it widely?
this is freedom of speech. I'm allowed to say what I want.
You absolutely are, but I'm trying to understand why you do, because you have to know it puts you in the middle of the partisan divide in the country. It makes you a lightning rod for criticism. I mean, do you like that? People today saying he's an anti-Semite. I don't think you are.
No, I'm definitely. I'm like a pro-Semite, if anything.
I believe that probably is the case.
Yes.
But why would you even introduce the idea then that would be the case?
I mean, we don't want to make this a George Soros interview.
No, God, no. I don't want to at all. But what I'm trying, even
social pressure. He's trying to manipulate him.
Do your tweets hurt the company? Are there Tesla owners who say, I don't agree with his political position and I know it because he shares so much of it? Or are there advertisers on Twitter that Linda Yaccarino will come and say, you got to stop, man. Or, I can't get these ads because of some of the things you tweet.
Long pause.
I'm reminded of there's a scene in The Princess Bride. Great movie.
Great movie.
Where he confronts the person who killed his father. And he says, offer me money. Offer me power. I don't care.
So you just don't care. You want to share what you have to say.
I'll say what I want to say, and if the consequence of that is losing money, so be it.
Okay. How do you make?
Come on, man! I heard that, and I was like, yes, that's it. What's interesting is that there's been a few podcasts we've done. Not that we've gotten super edgy, where the day after I'll listen back and I'm like, oh no, did I go too far? Did I step out of bounds? And then I think, what boundaries? What are acceptable? What are my boundaries that I'm making for myself? Or what are the boundaries that others are making for me that I'm confining myself to? I'm a business owner. And so I think, oh shoot, you can't talk about these things. You can't talk about your faith so explicitly. You can't be yourself. You can't talk about politics. You can't do that. You're a business. You're supposed to be stale. And then I think about it some more, and then it gets time to okay, you got to post this podcast. Are you going to just pause and post it? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to post it. And I go back to the first video I posted when I launched this podcast, and I announced it on Instagram. But I said, we're going to talk about whatever we want to talk about, and I imagine we'll probably get in trouble. And so it reminds me, I'm glad I wrote that way, and I posted that. Because just like Elon Musk, it's like he can get in that same mindset where he's an owner of multiple big tech companies. He was involved with PayPal, obviously with SpaceX, eBay, all these different big tech platforms. That I imagine he would think, why are you talking about these things, Elon? You're just the owner of Twitter. And I love his persistence, because at the core of it for him, I really think, and I don't necessarily align with him ideologically perfectly, of course, but I think at the core of it is he's trying to do the best for humanity in his mind. And there are certain threats that come against the ideal world. And an obvious one would be an authoritarian society that says you cannot speak freely. You cannot be free. You cannot speak freely. You cannot say what you want to be. You can't be yourself. And I think he's calculated that in his mind so much that he says, I have to speak freely. Even if I get called an anti-Semite, even if I get, even if I lose half of the value of my company that I just bought, $22 billion, whatever it is that it's currently worth. I think it might be more than that, of course. Offer me money. Offer me power. I don't care. At some point, it's got to get to that point of purity where you don't care, where the meaning of what you're saying is true. And so I get to that moment in my mindset of like, look, I'm not, I said it in a podcast before, but my wife encouraged me early on in this endeavor. You're not just a silversmith. And none of us are just our profession. We're much more than that. But it's weird. We get these boxes that we pick, we make for ourselves. And it's hard because you're like, shoot, should I self-censor? Is it going to strategically be a poor choice? Am I going to lose customers? Would it be smarter or wiser if I just, didn't talk about certain things? Didn't talk about Jesus? Would I make more money? Would I attract a non-Christian, client? Would I make, And at the core of it's like, no, yeah, maybe. But that's not what matters most to me. I think people need to revert back to their integrity and be honest. I think that's where the value is, even if there's no reward in this world for it. Because many times there's not. And sometimes there is, I talked about that the first podcast. I was talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They get put in the fire. And I'm sure they had no expectation they'd get out of it. But they did. All of the disciples of Jesus' disciples, all of them, with the exception of John, though he did get boiled alive in oil, died as martyrs for what they believed. Should that discourage us from being truthful first? Not me. I understand it can be discouraging for that, but I think we need to tune ourselves, in a logical sense. And I think this is really where Elon's engineering mind comes in. And I imagine this is what his calculation is that if we don't speak up, if we don't fight he calls it the woke mind virus, if we don't defeat these things, then we won't have a business on the other end of it. We won't have a society on the other end of it. So if we're quiet about these things or whatever, then what are you defending? You're not defending anything. They say the only way out is through it. And I think a lot of lighthearted people want to just ignore it. I want to ignore it, but my conscience won't allow me to. There's also the principle of just being true and authentic that I've been exploring. I watched this on Andrew Schultz. We brought him up on a previous episode. And of course, Joe Rogan, the biggest podcast ever. Well, Joe Rogan seems to have this purist mindset about podcasting, where Andrew Schultz, he has a great podcast. He's got a very popular podcast called Flagrant. And but it's very high production. It's like a set. It's like a late night show. And Joe Rogan's show is very lo-fi, relatively lo-fi. It's just based on authenticity, conversations. And he just has a guest and there's no agenda, really. It's just like, hey, let's chat. Let's have a good time. Let's explore ideas. Let's have fun. And there's something so pure about that. And I think that it's a conscious decision on Joe Rogan's part, because he kind of makes fun of Andrew Schultz when he goes on his show, respectfully. But he's like, what is this? All these lights. This isn't a podcast. This is a late night television show. And I took that and I was like, oh, there's something interesting there I want to chew on. Where Joe Rogan, he has like this purist mindset of like, just be you, man. I think he said it before. He said, if you're an interesting person, you should create a podcast. Everybody should create a podcast. And I think that too, But authenticity. And for those, and so that drives me to be like, shoot, no, you got to be you. Screw it if it's bad for business. You got to be you. And but it doesn't compute sometimes. I'm like, oh, this is a bad idea. Because I know It used to be my mindset. You don't bring religion, politics into these things like business because you're going to turn some people off. Yeah. I'll let you know that I'm a Christian first before I'm a businessman. And so I think that that's a big point, you know. There's this idea that for some reason Christians got to leave their Christianity over in the corner. And I get kind of pulled into that idea sometimes subconsciously. It's like, what are you doing bringing your Christianity into the public square, into your business, and into all these things? But at some point, I think that's the reason why we got into this mess, is that the people that do have principles, that do have objective moral values, that do have faith in a higher power, in the ultimate reality, in absolute truth, have left that all in the corner. And I don't think that we should do that. I think that that's contributing to the problem that is the society we're currently living in. That's my rant. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. We had some listener questions. So we're going to hear some of those. Chorus has some, I think.
Let me pull them up here.
Excuse me. I've had this.
We have, you have a cough?
Yeah, I've had this cough. I got sick a couple weeks ago. You could hear it in my voice in the last episode. But now I just have this like tickle. It just won't quite go away.
Good, though. It sounds like Phoebe when she gets sick. She tries
the
to hold
sexy
on to
Phoebe
it.
voice. Yeah,
you got that sexy
Yeah.
Phoebe voice. All
That's
right, we have a submission that says, "What's the last thing that made you laugh really hard?"
I feel like I laughed today in the car. Like it's just like a random thought that I had. And I was like, that's so funny. I'm so funny. It's like when you wake up from a dream and you're like, that was a really good idea. And then you wake up a few minutes later, like more, and you're like, that was really stupid.
So dumb. Yeah, you can't hold on to those genius.
Yeah.
The genius of your sleep mind.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another one. What are some of your favorite family traditions?
We're building them right now. One of my favorite personally is watching It's a Wonderful Life with the fam. That's like a very, very grounding movie. And we watch that every year, every Christmas time. What about you?
We have a tradition of me and Gabby on Christmas Eve, we exchange gifts together on Christmas Eve while looking at lights.
Oh, cool.
So we kind of get a break from like the busyness, and I work for a big church and we have lots of family, so the holidays are kind of crazy. But we carve out like an hour on Christmas Eve, go look at lights and exchange gifts in the car. And that's how I ended up proposing, because that was like one of our only traditions. So I always look forward to that one.
Nice. Are you guys consciously and intentionally introducing new traditions? Is that something that's on your radar?
Yeah, it is. I think growing up as a pastor's kid, a lot of our traditions were kind of like be at church for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so even with my parents now, as an adult, we are kind of intentional. Like, hey, this is something we want to try to do from now on, and really set time aside for it, you know?
Yeah. And especially with kids, you know, I feel like the burden of having to do that, having to introduce those traditions. Because if we don't, me and my wife, then they won't have them.
Right.
And those traditions are kind of sacred. They can become really sacred, very, very prized moments that you can come to expect every single year, you know?
Yeah, they can ground you when life is chaotic, for sure.
Yeah. And they become fond memories as you become older and you look back and you're like, oh, yeah. And so I actually screenshot, I have really tried to be very conscious and intentional about them, especially around holiday times. Cookies, really attacking all the senses. So like, you know, thinking about smell. Bree's really good. Like we have a lot of, you know, holiday movies. Like we'll watch certain movies at certain holidays and we'll say no to certain things. Like 4th of July time, we tend to watch like Sandlot. That's a pretty big tradition for me and the kids, and we'll watch Sandlot.
That's cool. I would like more 4th of July traditions. Make it a bigger deal.
And I think we're going to have more because one of my sons is born on the 4th of July.
That is so perfect.
Isn't
That's
that
so
wild?
fitting.
It's so me too. All my friends were like, of course. For a guy that loves America so much. His son to be born on America the 4th of July.
That's a blessing. That's
It's
awesome.
it was pretty awesome. Yeah.
All right. I have another one. Says, what was your favorite ever vacation?
Favorite ever vacation? It has to be my honeymoon. Not by obligation, but just because. You know, to do the California, the 101, like for someone who's lived most of his adult life just not idolizing, but loving the 60s and the history of California and the Christian hippie movement of, you know, the Jesus Revolution, that type of stuff. Doing the 101 was just it. And I think I had done it before, but to do it for my honeymoon was just really special. We did the whole Big Sur thing, but before we did that, we went to like Point Reyes. I think that's how you pronounce it, near San Francisco. And it's like that lighthouse. Oh, I got some of my favorite photos I've ever taken. Gosh, I love taking photos. It takes a certain mindset to get into, but we got some really cool photos, some videos. I actually captured our proposal video. Maybe I'll show that one time later, but yeah, probably be in short, my honeymoon. We did and then we went on a cruise. It was a very, you know, to go on a cruise is quite elaborate, luxurious. But actually, I haven't shared this story. I'm going to share this story because it's pretty good, pretty grounding. We went on that cruise. And we didn't have a lot of money at the time, you know. We had a little bit of wedding gifts, you know, that was nice, but I wasn't making much money at the time. Bree wasn't making much money, so we didn't have a lot of money going into marriage. But we got on the cruise. We had it paid for. We had all you can eat food, all you can eat ice cream, that type of thing. So you're living the cruise where it's just like all you can eat, just indulgence, overindulgence of everything. And then we stopped, excuse me, in Ensenada, Mexico. And we didn't have enough money. We didn't think we had enough money to really take the shuttle to the destination spot. And they let us just get off and go walk around. But it wasn't like a spot to get off and go walk around. It was like, as soon as you left the dock, it was like rough. But we were on the water. So we're like, oh, let's go walk to the beach. But the beach was miles and miles away. We didn't realize. So we walked down the road and go light to light. And again, I mentioned this in my the previous episode about the honeymoon, but my renewed mindset of like, oh no, I'm responsible for another human being. Like if someone comes and attacks us, or I am the guy that I've got to like fend off offenders. You're
the first responder.
But that was really present on my mind during that trip. Anyway, so we go down and we try to find a spot that's kind of nice, but it's all like this really industrial waste. It was terrible, really ugly trash everywhere. And, it was an interesting walk, but it was a couple mile walk. Anyway, so we start walking back after we find nothing. And I'm like kind of paranoid, like I'm in a foreign country and who am I going to call? What am I going to do if something happens, other than just fight? And, so I'm like, let's just get back to the ship. Let's go. And so we're walking back and we stop at a stoplight. And there's this guy who in my peripherals, I know he's trying to get my attention, our attention. And he gets Bree's attention. She tends to be more nice than me to strangers. And he's like, agua, asking for water. And mostly in America, when you get somebody that's like, trying to talk to you, they're like a panhandler, a bum, more so than an actual genuinely poor person. And so, but he was like, well, agua. And so Bree like looked at him and said, Chad, I think he's trying to get our attention. I was like, I know. And she's like, I think he wants water. And I looked over at him and I was like, oh gosh. And his like lips were like really chapped, like you see in the movies, like his bloody lips, and he was like not aggressive in any way. And I looked at him and I was like, oh no, look at me. I just had my American mindset of like, individualism and just leave me alone.
Super hydrated.
Very hydrated and fed. All you can eat ice cream. And I look at him and I'm like, shoot. And he's like, agua, food. He wanted food. So I walked to the gas station, which was across the street, and we go get him water and a sandwich. And I didn't know like the translation rate for the money. Anyway, so I go and I hand it to him and he takes it and he's super grateful. Thank you. God bless you. And we walk back to the ship after that. And I just started like kind of tearing up. And I was like, oh man, that was a real poor guy. He really was in need. And it bummed it like, and then here I go going back to the ship where I can have all my ice cream. And it just was like this weird awakening moment for me. I was like, whoa, there are really, people in need. I wish I could have given him more water and more food, or money or whatever. But anyways, it was just an interesting experience. But that was the best vacation for many reasons, and that being actually one of them. One of the reasons. One more?
Tell us about your very first vehicle.
A Mercury Marquis. This was a beater, a boat of a car. It was a gangster car too. A Mercury Marquis, man. And it was funny because I think my mom tried to prepare me like the ceiling, because this is an old like, what was it? It's like an old mobile. I don't know. It's Mercury Marquis, whatever it was. It's a big long car, classic vehicle. I think she paid like $500 for it. Anyways, so the ceiling fabric was falling in. So it had a big like bubble in the ceiling. But not only was it a bubble, there was scratch marks.
Oh God.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Oh dude, it was like they had a wild time in there. Whoever previously owned that car. But it was my first car.
How old was it?
It was probably from the 80s, 70s. It wasn't super nice. Are you looking one up?
Yeah, just trying to see the style of it. Was it like this, or was this? See if I can get it.
Like I would. No, that's nice. That's kind of cool. Is that a Mercury Marquis?
I think it's an older one, maybe.
Huh. That's pretty awesome. It was a grimy car. It was cool. Like it, visually it would look better than modern cars, in my opinion. But it was a beater. I used to put $5 in gas every time I'd go get gas, because I was a little teenager, didn't have a ton of money. All right. Last thing, final video. Speaking of not censoring, here we go. There's a lot of transgender stuff going on. I don't know what the right word is for the algorithm.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there is actually 72 genders now, which means that men are better than 71 genders. Boys!
Base.
Carried away. I actually went to a bar that had gender-neutral washrooms, and it's kind of weird because I'm just like taking a shit in a girl's washroom. And there's like these 20-year-old girls
awesome.
looking at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, this is your idea, 20-year-old girls. Putting this on me, But then I came out and I was telling my buddy it was kind of weird, and he goes, dude, this place doesn't have gender-neutral washrooms.
He's just going to the women's restroom.
He just took a shit in the girls' washroom, and everyone's talking about it. Ooh, I guess I'm a little more progressive than you.
All right. That's all we have for you for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the show. Love you. Bye.